You're listening to the Daily Sales Tips podcast, and I'm your host, Scott Ingram. Today's tip comes from JoBeth Hanak. JoBeth has been in sales for almost 6 years, successfully moving from being a number one personal trainer to a top rep in SaaS sales. She's been successful in full cycle closing roles and recently started an enterprise BDR role selling dispute management software. Here she is.
Hey, it's JoBeth, and I'm going to talk about how I got out of my first sales rut. So for me, just like a little bit of background, my first few years I was in sales, I was on fire, I was constantly at the top, and I was very confident in my abilities. And, to be honest, that became part of my identity. With my friends outside of sales, they knew me as she's super successful in sales and does awesome things, But, eventually I got to the point to where inevitably I went through the really normal experience of having my first rut. And I feel like for most people, the natural reaction is to be like, okay, I'm going to double down. I'm going to start working super hard. I'm going to stay super late. This can't be happening. I must stop it right now. And, just this terrible, stressful feeling. And, that's how I responded to this at first. And whenever I was talking to one of my friends about it, about how terrible my life was going and how stressed out I was having a hard time sleeping at night. She pointed out that I was making a lot of blanket statements about myself that had, nothing to do with who I was as a person and everything to do just with my current work situation. And, that's kind of whenever I realized that my life and identity revolved around my job and success. So whenever work wasn't going well, my life was not going well. I think a lot of this came from a deep fear of failure that I've constantly, and in other situations in this one, had to combat and start to, figure out how to work through. So what I did this time, this was in, early 2019, I started to leave work every day at 5 and just completely would turn off my work brain. I would go to a cycling class at 5:30 p.m. and hang out with friends. And I started to really build an identity and start to learn more about myself outside of success. I found joy outside of success. And I think that's super important. I went through a lot of other times since then where it's been really rough, namely the pandemic. And honestly, they were rough times, but they weren't as bad because I had other areas in my life that were happy. And so I, whenever work wasn't going well, I could lean deeper into my hobbies or my friendships or my relationship. So yeah, I think that's where I would start. Obviously you do have to be hitting your activity metrics and whatever. But, for me, the first step is always to make sure I'm in a good headspace. Because during this time, I also went back and listened to my calls. And whenever I was doing well, I sounded, pretty normal, pretty great. And whenever I listened to demos, whenever I was feeling really bad, you could totally hear it in my voice. So, for me, before I start addressing any other sales skills or anything like that could be holding me back, I'm going to go back and make sure I'm taking care of myself. I'm getting enough sleep, enough exercise, and, enough positive things going into my life. So I was not just depending on my sales and on my career to bring me fulfillment. So I hope that helps. If you're going through this, I'm happy to talk to you. I know it can be pretty lonely. So yeah, feel free to reach out, add me on LinkedIn, and thanks for having me on here.
The other way you can get out of a rut is to connect with JoBeth on LinkedIn. Even if you're not in a rut, we've got a link for you to connect with JoBeth at DailySales.Tips/1013. Once you've done that, be sure to come back tomorrow for another great sales tip. Thanks for listening.